y'all. This is Tracy.
Hey, I'm Reese.
Welcome back to another episode of Haunted Tea Podcast, where we spill the tea about all things paranormal, creepy, and otherworldly. This week's a little bit different. Our show's all about the paranormal, supernatural, and creepy, but working with energetic entities may seem to be in a completely different realm to some anyway, but to me, today's topic fits right in. Hey, Reese, have you ever heard of tulpamancy?
No, not in. Nuh-uh.
There's this guy, his name's Luca Del Deo. I think it's Deo. It could be Dio. But anyway, he gave a great TED talk on tulpamancy. There's going to be a link that we'll leave for you guys down in the resources. But basically, in that TED talk, he's explaining that the whole idea of tulpamancy is centered around meditation. And it's known as the process of creating a sentient, separate consciousness using the power of the mind through focus and intention. I guess there's also specialists in tulpamancy called tulpamancers. Doesn't that sound fancy? Good news is that we don't have to get written permission or pay extra high copays to work with these specialists. Ha ha ha, I'm funny.
Hell nah.
Tulpamancers use the term tulpamancy to refer to the creation of a willed imaginary friend, which practitioners consider to be sentient and relatively independent. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, because we haven't even discussed servitors or egregores yet.
You know, what it makes me think of, though, is necromancy and necromancers in the same sense of what I understand of tulpas to be.
Right. Well, and it's interesting, too, because I don't know a whole lot about necromancy. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, too, because my ascendant is Scorpio, and most of my life lessons are supposed to be centered around death and sex. Thank God it's not at the same time. But it's interesting because I haven't delved into that very much at all.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a rabbit hole that I personally would try not to go down.
Right. It can get a little dark.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Modern practitioners, though, they consider tulpas to be a psychological rather than a paranormal concept. I don't know. Quite literally, though, whether from our own energetic bodies and brains, the collective unconscious, or even the quantum field of physics, out of the ether comes a thought and motion. And chaos magicians, you were talking about necromancers, I think they may be kind of in the same ilk, not doing the same exact beliefs or practices, but they create and use them on a regular basis. And you're asking, create what? Well, servitors, tulpas, and egregores, of course. And like I said, that's what we wanted to share with you guys in this week's episode.
You know, I had to do some pretty serious digging to really understand what the topic is. I know you've mentioned it in earlier episodes, but I still had trouble kind of grasping the concept. So I had to go to Reddit, and I found what was probably the best explanation that I could find. They said that servitors are beings brought into existence through magical rituals to serve a specific purpose. Kind of like a golem, but golems are more physical than spiritual in their nature. Servitors remind me kind of like the macros that I used to do on Ultima Online way back in the day, but I'm still kind of struggling to grasp the concept. I don't know if you know what macros are. I was this nerdy gamer kid, and I played this game called Ultima Online that was kind of comparable to World of Warcraft, but more like medieval. Mm-hmm. And you can set your characters to perform a certain thing. So like before I would go to school in the morning, I would set one of my characters to fish all day. And then when I got home, what was caught during the day, when I could sell it, trade it, get my magical herbs and tools and things that I needed to do other things in the game. But that's literally all that character would do all day was fish for me, and I would reap the benefits.
I played WoW, so I get what you're saying. That's kind of funny.
So here's my question, though. Can servitors and poltergeists be related? Here's my thought. With this being more psychological than paranormal, my mind goes to the ESPs, the extrasensory perceptions, the things that have been proven to be psychological and almost neurological in nature versus the paranormal. Now, what we know of poltergeists is that they are attracted to high emotional energies.
Yeah, just like we discussed last week and several other times. They love to feed off of us.
Right. So could a chaos magician, or not even a chaos magician, could a normal person that may have a little bit of heightened ability inadvertently be creating servitors and then mistaking them for poltergeists?
Hmm. Well, see, now I think that's a really thought provoking question. But I mean, to me, the poltergeists are seemingly mindless, like a servitor. But at the same time, servitors are usually created to perform a task for the creator, whereas poltergeists don't seem very task oriented or minded.
Mhm.
And for that matter, what about shadow people? Could they possibly be thought forms produced by the intentional or even unintentional waves of energy sent forth by aware or even unaware people? Can servitors and poltergeists be related? Can poltergeists be mistaken for servitors?
That's where I'm kind of, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows the answer, but I do think that there's a very thin line or veil, and that the two may cross over unintentionally without any provocation from the people involved, or at least
Hmm.
any intentional provocation.
I mean, to me, I think in a lot of ways, I think it's half and half. I think some of the phenomena that's considered paranormal is occurring outside of us that we have nothing to do with as far as our energies and frequencies. I also kind of believe that other people's frequencies are what's creating the paranormal out there. And then our frequencies and our energies that we're putting out there are also creating. I think it's a combined effort between all the different forces of the universe.
Hmm. We were watching a paranormal show last night, and they were talking about residual energy. And we all know what residual energy is. It's where there may be a ghost that's performing the same tasks that they were performing in life, not knowing that they've passed on. So it could be somebody
Right.
looking out the same window, or, going back and
Or
forth.
like your walking man.
Exactly. Exactly. So I do wonder. Oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. I do wonder if if some of the what we thought at one point were residual hauntings could be a servitor that was not intentionally made, or just maybe there was an intentional servitor made that wasn't closed out properly. I don't know how that works.
Right. Is there someone else that decided to, and we'll get into this a little bit later about how to create a servitor or a tulpa or an egregore, but is there someone out there that imagined and visualized their own servitor that would be walking and guarding where you were at, and they imagined in their mind that it looked like a Chicago 40s mob boss?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm wondering. And, I wonder too if the materials of where this is, this was a house built of concrete and wood. So is the wood
Hmm.
holding memories and amplifying it? Maybe that's what's partially going on in my house here. I don't know.
Yeah, because there's some really old wood there.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here talking about servitors like everybody already knows what they are.
Okay, so I had to look all this stuff up because I had no idea. According to what I found on Wikipedia, a servitor is an entity specifically created by the magician to perform a set range of tasks, and are created by deliberately budding off portions of our psyche and identifying them by means of a name, trait, symbol, after which we can come to work with them and understand how they affect us at a conscious level. That is a mouthful. And to me, it sounds like Voldemort's Horcruxes. He's just like slicing off pieces of his soul and like, here's some in the snake, and here's some in this, and here's some in this.
Have some of that. Have some of this.
So, Wikipedia goes on to talk about how a magician may choose to create servitors from negative aspects of their psyche, much like the Horcruxes, such as habits, shortcomings, faults, and revulsions. And in doing so, they can interact with those traits as their personal demons and can either bind or banish them to eradicate them from the psyche. That is interesting to me as well, because anybody that's familiar with a 12-step program like Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, our sixth step, we are identifying negative aspects of our personality that we want to get rid of. And to me,
Hmm.
this sounds like exactly what we're doing, only in the 12-step programs, we're doing it a little bit different way than actually using magic to draw these pieces out of us and bind or banish them. But that might be something to bring up with some of these home groups and be like, hey, let's try an experiment. Let's try it this way.
Right. Maybe you can visualize that negative aspect that they say they want to, they want to stop. They don't,
Mm-hmm.
and actually bring it into life and have it banished from their actual behavior, their activities,
Mm-hmm.
all of that.
Yeah.
If we know about servitors, what can we tell them about tulpas?
So correct me if I'm wrong. My findings are that a tulpa is a being that is brought into existence through the imagination of a collective, like think aliens or cryptids or men in black or the Slender Man, etc., depending on how you look at it. They could be physically real or they could be metaphorically real, but they are real enough to externally affect the lives of those that believe in them. That's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
It does make me think of the old hag or the hat man to a degree.
Right. Yeah. And I was thinking about that earlier too, about the Hat Man being a tulpa, and was he sent to terrify someone on purpose? Has he been sent to just watch and keep an eye
Mm-hmm.
from a creator or a group, possibly a group? Egregores are more from groups, but someone that wanted a sentient being.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, if you think about it, how many people, practitioners, are going to purposely say, I want to create a tulpa, but it has to be wearing a hat?
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe that theory's a little silly. I'll have to ponder on that some more.
Well, here's another question. Can we inadvertently create them in dreams? Could a nightmare that is real enough and deep enough in our psyche cause that to kind of crack off and take on a life of its own or a form of its own?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. In my opinion, I think we could. I know that I accidentally, inadvertently created a tulpa when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can create them while we're in our waking hours, then I'm sure that we can do it in our sleeping hours.
Mm-hmm. So is it just if we give enough thought to something and we give something, we let it take up so much space in our mind rent free, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I know we can manifest things. We can manifest, like I need a better job, I needed this, I needed that, and kind of send those out into the universe to help ourselves along the way a little bit faster than if we were doing things on our own, so to speak. But is it similar with creating these, that if we're thinking about it enough and we're putting it out there enough in the universe, that eventually it can take on its own form without us doing anything specific?
Yes. Yes. I firmly believe that it can. Now, there is a physical component to addiction,
Mm-hmm.
but look what happens when we obsess over whatever it is that we're wanting, whatever it is our fix is, whatever it is that we're needing and wanting.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much that can go into the world and how much it can affect us and how much it can affect others.
Yeah. See, that gives me chills because I wonder, especially with authors like Stephen King comes to mind, Dean Koontz, some
Hmm.
of these things that they visualize and that they spend a lot of time putting their energy into. Are they sending those out into the physical world?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question too, because in a lot of ways, writers are obsessed with their work
Mm-hmm.
and getting out what's in their head, and they're exercising their demons through their writing. They're literally spilling their blood with the pen,
Yeah.
and so to speak, or the keyboard.
I don't like that.
That is an interesting question to think. Are they creating entities that they're sending out into the world? And are they staying in our realm? Are they going into the different astral realms?
That's another interesting and horrifying thing that's going to keep me up all night. I mean, are they living parallel alongside us, or is there some weird creepy forest somewhere that they're being banished to, and there's this just island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that's got all of these creatures?
Right? They're all congregating together.
Ew, I don't like that.
Yeah. And you were talking about thought forms.
Mhm.
And I mean, what's happening with these thought forms? Where are they going? What are they doing?
Yeah, that kind of throws me off a little bit. It makes you wonder what's going on when you're sleeping, especially for people that don't remember their dreams or their nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
Are they manifesting something terrible into the real world and they have no idea? It almost brings to mind when we were looking for a house when we were trying to leave Florida, my only criteria was I wanted an old house and I wanted an old haunted house. That was my criteria. And I swear I was going to drive these poor real estate agents crazy because I was in Florida and I had these people that were running from house to house to house for me because we couldn't physically be here to see them. And my number one question was like, okay, how much land is there? Is there a fence? Is there a ghost?
That is so funny. So you literally told your real estate agent, I need you to find me a house with this many bedrooms, with this amount of land,
Mhm,
with these laws that I can follow, whatever regulations are that I can live with.
mhm.
And by the way, I need it to be haunted.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's fucking awesome.
Well, and Nick and I had this conversation last night because we went into contract with this house and then we came up here to see it because it was so hard buying a house with all of these cash investors everywhere. So you really had to be ready to go into contract the second you saw it. And so we went into contract and then we came up here to visit the house and we did the walkthrough and everything, but I didn't get any sense of any kind of paranormal activity whatsoever when we were here.
Hmm.
And so I almost wondered, like, did I bring in some of the activity that we're having now because that was one of my criteria was I needed a haunted house?
Right. And then so your thought forms, you release them into the house.
Maybe. I don't know. At this point, I'm kind of questioning.
It's kind of interesting too because you think about, like when you get a haunted doll,
Hmm.
a lot of times they'll tell you you can wait days to weeks to months for that doll to show itself or to become active, and they say, oh well, maybe it's because the spirit that's in that vessel is shy and they're not really ready, to show themselves. Or is it that we're focusing and obsessing and putting our thought forms into that haunted doll or into that haunted place or
And to kind of jump off of that, when we bought our dolls, we got these long descripts of them. And so we had an idea of what to expect and we focused on that. But if I didn't have that piece of paper, would the entities that came with the dolls be whatever it was that I was wanting them to be or projecting onto them?
right, yeah.
Would they not have been our little girls that we were expecting and instead showed up as an entity of a cranky old lady who would turn off all the TVs at 7 p.m. because it was bedtime? Could we have wound up with something else completely because we weren't focusing our energy and our efforts on what we were expecting to receive?
Interesting thoughts. So we've covered servitors and tulpas. The next thing is egregores. What did you know about egregores before we decided to do this episode?
Literally nothing. Nothing at all. I'd never even heard the word. Okay, so what I what I learned with the research is an egregore is also known as a mimetic entity, and it's a servitor or thought form that has become so well used and popular or enculturated that it takes on a life of its own, so to speak. And it seems to exert an influence on the folks whose projection it actually is. And then those people, in turn, can sometimes completely forget that they are the creators rather than the servants of the projection, which also kind of lends back to the haunted house. Like, did we cause this? And maybe this house wasn't haunted at all, but I was so dead set on having a haunted house that I made it, and now I have to live with my own creation that I didn't know that I created.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of what did they used to say about the mass hysteria that started with the Salem witch trials and some of the poltergeist activity that many started to suspect and believe that young teenage girls were the cause of
Hmm.
because of their tremendous amount of anxiety and emotion and angst and energy that they put out into the universe.
Hmm. Of course they were. They had that anxiety. They were worried about dying. They were worried about being hung for being a teenage
Right.
girl.
Hmm. Yeah, can you imagine? You've already got the normal teenage angst. Now imagine being worried that your mother or yourself, that you're going to be accused of, giving somebody a wart on their ass, and now you're going to hang
Yeah.
and burn. And your comment about that these people forgetting that they're creators
Hmm.
rather than the servants of the projection, it reminds me of the all encompassing big daddy of egregores, God himself.
Hmm.
You get enough people together that believe in one thing, and they become so, as you said, enculturated by it.
Hmm.
They come up with what they decide God is. And it changes over time over what they think he looks like, what they think she looks like, what they believe. In my personal opinion, when I have amazing experiences, when I have big, huge moments,
Hmm.
I usually see energy. I don't see, a guy with a long white beard up in the sky. I don't see the olive skinned Jesus of Middle Eastern or even Western America standards or thoughts. I don't see that.
Hmm.
I don't see anything that's shaped like a human or whatever, which is really even more further fascinating to me because when we were talking about shadow people and Hat Man and all that,
Hmm.
what I saw when my chimes were, blowing gently in the breeze, so to speak, was a shadow circle.
Yes. Oh my God, that's true.
So did I create that? Did it come out of the field of possibilities? Did it come out of my part of being a part of the collective unconscious? Where did it come from?
Right.
My thought forms were, well, I guess I can't say they're pretty standard
Yeah.
because they're a lot stranger than what I hear from other people. They kind of look at me a lot of times puzzled and a little bit nervous, but
What the hell is this lady going to do next?
mhm.
Okay. So to summarize, a thought form is any thought given some sort of object permanence like property, intentionally or otherwise. A servitor is a thought form created with the intention of magically performing some particular task, and it may or may not exhibit agency of its own toward that end. A tulpa is a very specific sort of servitor whose task is literally be a person. And it may be informative to compare and contrast with the thought form that naturally occurs in the growth and socialization of like a human baby.
Now see, and to some degree, first of all, I want to comment on your comment that servitors may or may not exhibit agency of their own.
Mhm.
I think that they don't exhibit agency of their own unless they are slowly morphing and you are feeding, and we'll get into that too, what feeding means. Unless you're paying that servitor enough attention and you are helping to morph that servitor into a tulpa,
Hmm.
then I think it has agency of its own as it's morphing into a tulpa.
Interesting.
And I don't necessarily agree with that tulpas have to be human.
Mhm.
I believe that they can still be just an energetic form of being. You can visualize and create them into any form. But there are other people that, of course, do firmly believe that they have to be like a human.
Right. So it's more of a personal preference on your expectations.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I do. And then again, to summarize on egregores, they're basically they're a servitor and a tulpa combined. They are way more. They're not only just an energy being, they're an encompassing all being. I believe that egregores are omniscient.
Mm.
And I believe that they have the ability to affect change on a large, large scale basis. Whereas I think servitors and tulpas do it on a more localized, smaller process.
Right.
But there's a book, it's called Philosophy of Dark Paganism, and it's by Frater Tenebris. And he defines an egregore as an occult term for an independently functioning spiritual entity created by one or more magical practitioners. Many egregores begin as thought forms, but then become capable of operating independently of the practitioners. And that defines thought form as an esoteric entity created by magic, and magic as a spiritual practice and process to influence the probability of events. The book itself, it mentions egregores in the context of archetypism, and we've talked about this before with you guys, and that's a view that understands the different gods and goddesses as either psychological structures, similar to Carl Jung's archetypes, or different currents of energy found in the cosmos that are anthropomorphized. I get extra points for big word usage and pronouncing that correctly. Thank you very much. Noting that some archetypists consider the gods to be thought forms created from worship and prayer by generations of believers. And the book further says, over time, these thought forms may become egregores that exhibit some autonomy apart from their worshippers.
Huh.
So, in my opinion and experience, servitors are not sentient or aware enough to be compared to anything sentient. If I wanted, let's say I wanted a servitor to clean my house, they would be the Roomba that I give program directions to for a specific task, like sweeping the floors, while hiring a maid to make the house shine and smell good would be the Tulpa. The maid or the Tulpa could make sentient, informed, autonomous decisions on just how they could accomplish what I asked them to do. You know, like noticing the windows are streaky, so they know the window cleaner is under the sink, and they make the complex decision to get the window cleaner, grab the paper towels, and then clean the window. So that's how I see the difference between servitors and tulpas.
Okay. See, that makes it a little bit easier for me to understand, and probably some of our listeners too. I mentioned egregores earlier, and the egregores, it seems, are tulpas that have become so widespread in belief that they can affect or control aspects of the entire world, such as the belief in money, the belief in the literal evangelical Christian God and Jesus. They may or may not literally exist, but they're brought into being simply by the pure power of collective belief. Does that sound right?
Right. Well, I think of egregores not only as a mutual belief, but more as the purposeful result of intentional creation by a group of people focused upon the accomplishment of a specific task or a shared ideology in motion. It's a fine line, semantically based difference, I know, but I see it as making a pretty big difference in being successful or not if that group is trying to make a large categorical change, as in a common belief that formed without a call to action or a specific set of tasks or actions requested of it. And like your mention of the belief in money, Reese, it formed over time, but so much of that belief system has become bastardized and negative, and this belief came from convenience, not at the behest of a group of people wanting to see definitive changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So also, egregores are known to be creations from mainly religious groups. And Reese, you referenced shadow people. We talked about, Hat Man, shadow people, cryptids. But do you remember we spoke about the Watchers back in our episode covering shadow people?
Yes.
So the Watchers, they're a good example of egregores to me. They're also known as the sons of God. And as we discussed in that former episode in Genesis, there's a reference to the Watchers that says they were sexually interested in human women, like some reports stating that shadow people sometimes take a sexual interest in those they visit, thinking of incubus, the male form of the female succubus.
Yeah.
And in trade for the sexual interactions, they would share magical secret arts that the average humans were not privy to. And this is what made God angry and caused him to start the flood in order to cleanse the impurities out of mankind and essentially cast a big watery do-over, right? So the traditional school philosopher Julius Evola, in his Revolt Against the Modern World, referred to an elite of spiritually aware people who keep tradition alive as those who are awake, apparently alluding to the Watchers in the most literal sense of their name, which is wakeful or awake. Information on where to find this book, of course, will be in the show notes and resources and all that. But you think about their sexual interest in humans, sharing their magical arts, whether or not you're awake or asleep, it all ties in. But egregores, they're formed by groups of people, but the groups of people also include chaos magicians, high magic practitioners, or even a small group of people that have the same interests as you. They don't have to be necessarily religious. Surely you guys have heard of powerful movements that started from just like a small few that desired to see a change.
Yeah.
But I mentioned chaos magicians and their gatherings to create egregores. What are those? Of course, they're the practitioners of chaos magic. And that might leave you guys wondering, okay, well, y'all have talked about chaos magic. What the hell is that? And that is a practice that teaches the essence of magic in that perceptions are conditioned by beliefs as you mentioned earlier, Reese,
Mhm.
what is formed and shaped by our beliefs. But anyway, perceptions are conditioned by beliefs, and that the world as we perceive it can be changed by deliberately changing those beliefs.
Right. So when I did some digging, I found that chaos magic can be summarized fairly easily. In essence, it's more a modern tradition of magic where practitioners have chosen to kind of strip away the religious aspect that many other forms of magic carry, like high magic or true paganism. It's been called an invented religion,
Hmm.
though I still don't think that the word religion is the right term here, as chaos magicians are trying to remove symbolism and ritualisms and theological aspects, which leaves behind a very basic set of techniques that's believed to be the absolute basis of magic in and of itself. These teachings hinge on the essence of magic, that perceptions are conditioned by beliefs, and that the world as we perceive it can be changed by deliberately changing those beliefs. So, what chaos magicians do is they utilize their own personal beliefs as something like a tool, and they create their own variation of magic by borrowing from other traditions and philosophies and religious movements, and even in some cases pop culture. And in actuality, this version of magic makes a lot more sense to me. In my mind, I'm equating it to the person who aligns themselves as being spiritual and having their own beliefs about creation and the universe without subscribing to any one particular system of beliefs. And they're going to kind of pull a little bit of belief from over here and a little bit of belief from over there instead of following
Hmm.
one specific pantheon. And I feel like for us ADHDers, the specific rules and organizations can turn a lot of people away from religion as a whole. And this is a way to kind of fix that. Chaos magic is only effective because of the belief of the practitioner, which varies a little from like voodoo religion, where it's generally understood that the recipient of a spell or a hex has to believe it in order for it to be effective.
So there's something to ponder and wonder on this as well. Are chaos magicians what we used to refer to as eclectic witches? So what I refer to that as, I started practicing and learning way, way back in the 80s,
Mhm,
and maybe even a little bit into the late 70s as a child.
mhm,
But what I learned back then and what we used to refer to these kinds of people as were eclectic witches. They didn't believe in any specific pantheon. They didn't believe in any specific set of rules. You couldn't pin them down.
mhm,
And so I find it fascinating that they're now called chaos magicians. And I've thought that since I first started learning
mhm.
and hearing about chaos magicians. So I'm thinking, does this further the idea that servitors, tulpas, and egregores really are coming from with our own subconscious mind? Are we pulling their energy and creating them from the quantum field of possibility, or is it really just like a combination?
Have you ever heard of chaos gardening?
No, I have not.
It's a theory where you take a bunch of different seeds, carrot seeds, and different beans and things like that, and you just throw it up in the air, and whatever sprouts, you nurture it. And this sounds so much like that because, as you said, an eclectic witch might be using some herbs like a green witch would, but also using some rituals like a high magic practitioner would. And
Hmm.
with chaos gardening, you're still gardening, but you're not subscribing to the rules of it. You're just throwing it
Hmm.
out into the universe saying, "Here, have everything all at once, and then whatever the birds don't eat, I'll nurture."
And you just expect success
Yeah,
and
exactly.
prosperity.
Yep. Whatever grows
Interesting.
together works together. The sunflowers will keep the pollinators around, and the carrots underneath will, they like the shade from the sunflowers. So it all works.
Hmm. Interesting. I'd love to find out more information on that. So now we've talked about servitors and tulpas and egregores and basics of what they are, but we haven't talked about how we could possibly create them. And I think our listeners might be really interested in that.
Hmm.
So one of the first things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to give it a name. after you decide what it is you want this entity to be doing for you.
Mhm.
So you want to give it a name. Give them a majestic name, a cute name, a forbidding name. Just name them and use that name every time you choose to focus upon the entity that you're wanting to create, that you're building up, and when you feed them and when you are dealing with them. Okay? Now, you're going to envision what your servitor is going to look like. All right? Literally, close your eyes and imagine, will your servitor have a physical form? Will it be in a human form? Go as far as what color hair, feathers, scales. Will it have a shroud? Will it be a cute dragon or even look like a little My Little Pony, right? And write it down. You want to write this stuff down, okay? You can imagine and envision your My Little Pony servitor clip-clopping around the house doing tasks. You can literally have your creation look like anything you can imagine. Okay? If there's nothing in the world that would make you happier than the thought of Jason Momoa or Johnny Depp lovingly hovering over you, get a pic of them, memorize their features if you haven't already, and use those in your creation.
Right.
Some magicians choose to use their energy in other areas instead of working on their appearance, and they'll create them as simple balls or waves of energy. Okay, you definitely want to talk it into creation, though. You don't have to speak it out loud, but your subconscious mind hearing your descriptions and descriptions coming forth from your mouth will help to store it in your brain. Talk to it. Give it the characteristics it'll need to accomplish the task you need it to do. If you're creating a tulpa for protection, envision thick leather armor. Tell it in present tense things such as you're brave and strong with an indomitable spirit, using only positive forces to keep others from attacking me. You'll want to be extra careful though, because a tulpa, having a mind of its own, could choose to take negative measures in order to accomplish its task.
Huh.
So you'll want to use language, imagery, and intent to get across to your creation what type of energy they should be employing.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you'll want to do is to draw a sigil. Many say they do this, and I've never actually done it. I've never drawn a sigil in the creation of a servitor or a tulpa. So I can say from my own experience, I've been successful without doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that Ivy the Occultist is one of my favorite occult creators on YouTube, and there's a link to her sigil magic video that will also be down in the resources. And I have worked with sigils before, and I can tell you that they do give me an incredible amount of concentration and focus on whatever working I was doing at the time. I've just never done it in the creation of a servitor or a tulpa. But you want to define their reason for creation. Any reason you choose them for is a good reason. Are you wanting to create one for protection, to accomplish a task? And this part of creation really needs to include intense visualization. You'll want to look in your mind's eye or use your imagination and actually see them performing the task or whatever it is that you're wanting them to do, as well as the successful completion of it. And it can be tricky because, like magic, it's important to clearly define what we want to happen, but also it's critical that we don't limit what it takes to accomplish it.
Hmm.
So you want to see them accomplishing it, but you don't want to see them actively doing it in specific steps that you have to require them to do, because that limits the efficacy of it. So like if you wanted them to walk from left to right, you don't want to necessarily say, okay, start on the left, walk 5 steps, look up, and then walk 5 more steps to get to the right.
Mm-hmm.
You want to see them starting on the left, and you want to see them culminating and finishing and starting to the right, referring to your walking man. Does
Right.
that make sense, or should I go more into depth on that?
That makes sense. But say I needed a protector. How would I be able to envision it going from left to right and patrolling without it body slamming any negative entity that gets in the way, or without it using force or negative aspects to accomplish that task?
So you're asking, how would you get a tulpa? In creating a tulpa, how would you visualize it protecting you without body slamming someone?
I'm not entirely sure that that's how I was trying to phrase it, but yeah, that's the gist of it. So if I wanted something that's going to patrol and keep everything negative out, how am I going to do that where, if my dog walks through the front door, it doesn't see that as something negative that it needs to use force against.
See, now in that, I would say that's like when you're working with creating a spell or you're doing a working or you're doing a ritual, you need to be specific in what you're requesting.
Mm.
As in when you are creating in your mind and you're writing down what you're requiring from your tulpa, and remember, they do have their own autonomy and free will, so you got to be real careful what you're setting them free to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll want to include in your language and in your visualizations who you're wanting to protect.
Got it. So super, super, super specific language so that nothing negative can come through or these loopholes can't be found and exploited.
Right. You don't want to tell them how to do it. You just want to make sure, like a good manager, you want to give them the tools to do the job, but you don't want to stand over their shoulder and tell them how to do it.
Right.
You don't want to be a micromanager.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things to consider is how you're going to maintain them or feed them. So these are just examples. Remember, listeners, whatever it is that you're deciding that you want to create, it's fully open to whatever your mind and your vision and your energy wants it to be. These are suggestions. You don't have to do it this way. If you want to take my suggestions and do it that way to start with so that you can then build off of that, great. But say for a servitor, feeding them is easy. You can choose to say a certain prayer, or you can use a drop of blood or a piece of hair, some sort of bodily fluid or a substance. When it comes to tulpas, the same concept applies, and none of them require physical food, although you can use food to feed them. Say you serve up a plate of some food you might consider sacred. That works to keep their energetic levels up since you're giving them the attention that they need and that they desire.
Okay.
There's also feeding them what they call programmed water. They've done research, and I forget the researcher's name, but he did research where if you would stand over a glass of water or an amount of water and you would say hateful things to it and put it in the freezer, and you would say nice things to another thing of water and you would put it in the freezer, the actual snowflakes that were produced, or the ice crystals, excuse me, not snowflakes, ice crystals that were produced would show different reactions. Or like when you're talking to, plants.
Yeah.
And they do that experiment where they say you yell and you talk nasty to plants and they don't do as well, but they thrive when you show them love and nurturing and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing that you can do, you can speak that over the food, you can speak that over the water, and you can feed these entities the water or the foods that you're programming.
Okay.
For feeding egregores, though, it gets a little bit more intense because egregores, like the Watchers or others with a more negative connotation or reputation, they have an unlimited appetite for the future and constant devotion of their creators and their believers. So that can be likened to obsessive, overwhelming amounts of feeding, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like actual praise.
Mm-hmm. In my mind's eye, you see the believers flailing themselves with the cat o' nine tails and the very, very overly done. Well, I can't say overly done. That's really too judgmental of me to say overly done. In my mind's eye, because I've never been a part of creating an egregore, I somehow equated that to overly done. But who am I to judge?
Right. What you or I might think is way, way, way over the top, overdone, might be super underwhelming to the recipient.
Right. Mm-hmm. So then the next thing you need to consider is storage. When you're creating one of these entities, you need to consider where they're going to reside. Egregores are commonly believed to reside in, some sort of heaven or underworld, but tulpas, they have free will and their storage isn't our right. However, servitors, they can be contained in a vessel, which you think about haunted dolls, you think about, what are some of the, love jars and hex spells that they use, bags or different jars. That's the kind of thing that you can use for a servitor, is you can put it in a vessel, and you can even dictate a certain part of your body that they can be stored in until you're ready to feed them. and that means basically paying attention to them.
Yeah.
Now, when I did my first servitor, I actually used the end of my left pinky. But you want to make sure that you include this in your creation. You want to write it down when you're describing what they look like and what they're doing and how you're going to feed them and all that. You want to write down where you're going to store them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people, they think that doing this can take weeks or sometimes months. But in my creations, I would simply focus on all of the above, except usually the name creation or the sigil. And I do that for about 3 to 4 days, and I'll usually see results.
Damn.
Which actually, I like that because I can be somewhat impatient at times.
Oh, yeah, me too. That's actually one of my character defects that Nick is always reminding me to work on.
But you need to limit too. When you're doing this creation, one of the things you think of too is you're going to limit the amount of time that they're going to be in service. Okay? You want to basically set an expiration date for when you want your servitor or tulpa to die. Now, your tulpa, you need to be real careful because sometimes they won't if you don't set those boundaries. But you do need to define a date or an action or event that will determine when your entity's done with what you put it into action for. It's especially important, like I said, to put an expiration date on that tulpa, or they can go on forever and they can evolve into more negative forms and more powerful forms.
Yeah.
Now, I think, honestly, when it comes to tulpas, when I was young, I think I accidentally created a tulpa. And like we discussed, they're a form of energy that tends to take on free will and autonomy, but they take on a life of their own and they can make decisions based upon whatever task that you want to have them do. Mm-hmm. And so when I was young, if I made a failing grade in my report card, my parents would clean my room out for the next 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Until I brought home passing grades in my classes. And so that left a lot of time to do nothing but sit and think and obsess. So I was fearful in many ways for reasons that I won't really go into too much detail here, but I can tell you that I directed a lot of time wishing and hoping I had someone to protect me. Mm-hmm. I focused a shit ton of my energy on this, and one day I felt a presence, and I couldn't see it, but and this sounds silly, but in my mind's eye, it looked like a giant Sylvester cat. Yeah, the cartoon version, a giant walking cat. And he started following me to school. And in many areas, I was no longer bullied because the kids doing it suddenly became sick. Or I even watched one girl that had spent her time tormenting me and bullying me in the past. She came walking towards me, and I could see that same hateful smirk that I was used to. And kid you not, she actually tripped over nothing right in front of me.
That's awesome. So here's a question. Because tulpas seem to have more of a Tibetan or Buddhist origin, if a regular person, somebody that's not magical and is just, normal person, decides to create one, can their how do I word this?
Are you asking if the tulpa gets to choose whether or not it has more of a good or an evil energy?
Well, yeah, because if you're not putting a direct intention and you're unintentionally creating a tulpa, does their autonomy have the ability to decide whether or not they're more good or evil?
Mm-hmm. Well, and Reese, this is one of the cautions that we as creators have to look at, because tulpas, they're given free reign and asked by their creators to make their own decisions. And so they absolutely can take on good and negative qualities and use their autonomy in any and every situation they find themselves in.
So they could decide, this person is going to harm my creator, so I'm going to use whatever means possible to prevent that from happening.
Yes.
Or like the tripping the girl, or, my creator needs this done, so I'm going to do something that most people wouldn't deem as morally acceptable to make sure that this person gets this leg up in their career, or
right,
make sure that they get this good grade in their test, even if that means helping the professor have a little bit of amnesia when grading
right right. And so and that makes me think even further on karma. Does that alleviate us of our karmic scales because it's another entity that's doing it? does that relieve us of our karmic responsibilities? Or because we are their creators, are we still responsible for anything negative that gets put out there? Like you said earlier, when you were talking about how servitors are created off of our negative aspects, to me personally, that's why I try to be extremely careful and make sure that I am specifying only good
Mhm.
when I'm creating one of these entities.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you really have to think of every possible angle so that there's not some tiny little sliver of a loophole that they can find to slip
Yeah,
through.
it's almost like when people describe dealing with demons.
Yeah, exactly.
You better protect yourself and you better be real careful how you word it and don't give them anything.
Yeah. Mhm.
But with tulpas and servitors, you do feed them. Interesting, right?
I mean, I want to go and create one now, but it's also like it seems like there's so many. This isn't something that I could just sit down and decide that I want to create one in an afternoon. Like
Oh,
this is something that
yeah.
I would literally have to sit and outline and figure out like, okay, if I do this, could it do this? How do I stop it from doing this without it doing this instead? Like there's a lot that goes into it.
Hmm. And I think that's why they say that it can take days to weeks to months. There are even some Buddhist monks that work on creating energetic entities that they label something else, but they work years to do
Mhm.
some of the things that they've accomplished or that they're working to accomplish. So
Yeah.
this episode, I mean, it was a bit of a challenge in regards to our efforts to trying to convey a true understanding of just exactly what a servitor, a tulpa, or an egregore actually are.
Mhm.
But I hope we were able to not only aid you guys in gaining a better understanding of them, but also help you to gain some new skills that should serve you well in almost any area of your daily lives. We're here to share our experiences, yes, but also we're intensely and insanely interested in providing value to your lives in the form of sharing knowledge. So maybe even a bit of camaraderie, of spooky solidarity with you guys, if you will. But we'd like to thank you guys for once again tuning in. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for your loyal listenership.
If any of our listeners have had experience with creating tulpas or servitors or egregores, even if it's inadvertently, and you listen to this episode and you're thinking back and you're like, oh shit, that's what that was, we want to hear about it. We want to hear about all of your experiences, all of your stories, all of your everything that happens that might be paranormal or might be psychological, because there's a very fine line. We have social media. We have Instagram. We have a Facebook page, Haunted Tea Podcast, where we have more of the business type stuff. And we have Haunted Tea Podcast Ghostly Gossip, where you can join, you can talk to other listeners, you can tell your own stories, you can tell them anonymously if you want to protect your identity. We are working really hard to maintain that a safe space where anybody can go in and talk about their experiences without feeling like they're being judged or not believed. We have YouTube now. We are on YouTube. Every episode is on YouTube for free. We are putting out a new episode every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We skipped last week, which was the February 4th episode because of some personal things, but we're going to try to make it up to you guys with a bonus episode
Yay,
sometime during the
bonus!
week next week. And then we should be on par for every Sunday, therefore. So keep an eye out for the bonus episode. We'll announce it on the Facebook. And we're also on Patreon. We post a lot of our links for our resources on Patreon. There's a lot of extra episode information on there. When we did our doll episode, we posted videos and pictures of our dolls as well as their backstories. When we did the pets episode, we posted a lot of the listeners' pets that had written.
Love those.
Love them. And send us all of your pet pictures anyway, just because it can never go wrong.
We love pet pictures.
Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify channel. That goes really far in helping us get the word out and helping us be able to continue doing what we do. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us. We are working on getting on iTunes. They do not like us for some reason, so it's requiring a tremendous amount of effort. And we're also working on getting on Pandora.
We will take a hammer and a nail and we will nail this down. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. We need to create a servitor for this.
We do. We really do. We're learning as we go, you guys. So y'all's support has been tremendously overwhelming at times. We really appreciate the fact that we've got so many listeners that have stood by us while we're figuring this all together.
Yes. Thank you kindly.
And send us all of your stories. Every single story that you've got, hauntedteapodcast@gmail.com. We want to know all the gossip. So, with that being said, we will see you guys next week and stay spooky, y'all. Bye.